Welcome back, everyone. Today we're doing something a little different. We're taking a deep dive into a deep dive. We've got this really cool podcast, Grammar Wars, where they break down common English grammar mistakes. And it's super fun. So we thought, why not really dissect those sentences, as if we were learning English for the first time.
Yeah, I love that. Grammar Wars has such clear examples. It's almost like a lesson plan just waiting to happen.
Totally. Plus, even when you think you know the rules, hearing them explained in a new way, it really helps. Oh, okay, now I get it. So think of this as your crash course in English grammar, the practical stuff. Ready to dive in.
Absolutely. Let's start with that first episode of Grammar Wars where they tackle subject-verb agreement.
Okay, so in this episode, the host, Emily, she asked one of her guests, Jake, to give her a sentence. And Jake says, "The dog runs in the park every morning."
And bam! Right away, we've got a perfect example of what not to do, because we're talking about more than one dog, right? So you need the plural form of the verb to run, which is just run, no S.
So it should be, "The dogs run in the park every morning."
Exactly. It seems simple, but even native speakers mess this up sometimes. The subject and the verb, they have to agree. Singular subject, singular verb, plural subject, plural verb.
Okay, so for anyone out there who's learning English, the subject is who or what is doing the action. So here, it's the dogs, and the verb is the action word. That's run.
Perfect explanation. And the reason we have this rule, it's all about clarity. If the subject and verb don't agree, it sounds, kind of strange.
Like it just doesn't fit.
Right. So to make sure Jake really gets it, Emily asks him for another sentence. And Jake, he says, "The dog run in the park."
Oh no, he did it again. Plural verb with a singular subject.
He did. But hey, we all make mistakes, right? That's how we learn. The correct sentence is, "The dog runs in the park." See that S at the end of run. That tells us we're talking about one dog.
This is such a good example of how, English grammar can be tricky. Even for native speakers, the rules aren't always obvious.
Definitely. That's why practice is key. And paying attention to, how native speakers actually use the language.
So if you're learning English, don't get discouraged by mistakes. It's all part of the process.
Yeah.
Just keep practicing. You'll get there.
Now let's move on to another grammar battleground. Past tense versus past participle.
Ooh, yeah, this one can be confusing. So in Grammar Wars, Emily asks Jake to tell her something he did yesterday. And Jake says, "I went to the mall."
The classic have-went mistake. This is where knowing the difference between past tense and past participles is, crucial.
Let's break it down. Past tense, that's for something that happened in the past, right? I walked to school yesterday. Walked is the past tense of to walk.
Exactly. Now, the past participle, that's what you use with helping verbs like have, has, or had to make those perfect tenses. I have walked to school every day this week.
So Jake should have used the past participle of go, which is gone, not the past tense went. The right sentence is, "I have gone to the mall."
Exactly. Now, Emily, to really test Jake, she throws in another common mistake. She says, "She has ate."
Which, of course, should be, "She has eaten." Eaten, that's the past participle of to eat.
And these are what we call irregular verbs, which basically means they don't follow the normal rules for forming the past tense or past participle. And English has, a ton of them.
I know, right? They can be a pain. But there are some, tricks and patterns that can help. But for English language learners, don't worry about memorizing every irregular verb right away. Focus on the most common ones, and you'll gradually get the hang of it.
That's great advice. One thing I love about this part of Grammar Wars is how, even though Jake's making mistakes, he's really trying to learn, asking questions, trying to figure out the reasoning behind the rules.
Yeah, I think that's so important for language learning. Being curious, asking questions, not being afraid to mess up.
Totally. Mistakes are opportunities to learn and get better.
Okay, ready for another grammar rule that even native speakers trip over. Who versus whom?
Oh, this one's tricky. It's all about subjects and objects.
Right. So Emily asks Jake to use one of these words in a sentence. And Jake says, "Who do you love?"
So close. He just used the wrong word. Who is a subject pronoun, meaning it's the one doing the action. Whom is an object pronoun. So it's receiving the action.
Okay, maybe we should break this down a bit. What exactly is the difference between a subject and an object?
Sure. The subject is the one doing the action. The object is the one receiving the action. So in the sentence, the cat chased the mouse. The cat is the subject. The mouse is the object.
Got it. So in Jake's sentence, who do you love? You is the subject because you are doing the loving. And the person being loved, that's the object.
Right. So the correct sentence is, whom do you love?
This is one of those rules that's helpful to know, but honestly, if you get it wrong, it's not a huge deal.
I agree. English is always changing, and the who versus whom thing, it's becoming less and less important.
So for those learning English, just be aware of it, but don't stress too much if you slip up.
Okay, let's tackle another common mistake. It's versus its.
Oh yeah, this one's classic. It's all about that apostrophe. So Emily asks Jake to use its in a sentence, and Jake says, the dog wagged its tail.
Uh-oh. Apostrophe in the wrong place. Its is a contraction, short for it is or it has. Its. Without the apostrophe, that's possessive. It shows ownership.
So Jake should use its without the apostrophe because, the tail belongs to the dog. The correct sentence is, the dog wagged its tail.
Precisely. It's confusing because we usually use an apostrophe for possession, right? Like the cat's toy.
Yeah.
But possessive pronouns like it's, his, hers, and yours, they don't need an apostrophe.
Just one of those quirky English things.
You got it. So you ready for another round of grammar wars?
Hit me with it. Let's see what other grammar gems Jake has for us.
Welcome back to our Grammar Wars deep dive. I think we're all learning a lot from Jake's grammar adventure.
Oh, definitely. He's like our grammar guinea pig. And, what's interesting is that his mistakes, they kind of highlight something important about learning a language. It's not just about memorizing the rules. It's about, understanding the why behind them.
Absolutely. That's why, going through these Grammar Wars examples, it's so helpful. It makes you think about why certain things work in English and others don't.
Exactly. So where did we leave off in our grammar battle?
Right. We were about to tackle those tricky homophones, those words that sound the same but have totally different meanings.
And I think our friend Jake was about to show us just how tricky they can be.
Oh, he was. So Emily, the host, she asks Jake to use one of the infamous homophones, there, in a sentence. And Jake says, they're going to the park.
Oh, Jake. He was so close. But those homophones can be a real minefield.
They can. He picked the wrong there, the one that shows a place. The right sentence would be, they're going to the park. There is just a shorter way of saying they are, and it shows what they're doing.
Yeah, it's all about context, right?
Yeah.
Meaning changes completely depending on which there you use.
Exactly. And of course, Jake, being Jake, asks the big question, so when do I use there and there?
That's the question, isn't it? It's confused English learners forever.
Right. So Alex, the grammar expert on the show, explains, he says, there is possessive. It's like, their house is big, and then he adds, there shows a place, like, the book is over there.
So simple, but so easy to mix up. It's like those optical illusions where you see one thing, then another.
Such a good analogy. But back to our grammar warrior, Jake. He's a quick learner, and he manages to use all three in one sentence. He says, they're going to their house over there.
It's beautiful. A perfect homophone sentence. And it really shows why understanding grammar matters, Using the right word can totally change what you're trying to say.
Definitely. Can you imagine if Jake had written, they're going to their house? Total chaos.
This is a great reminder for anyone learning English to really pay attention to those little differences between homophones. They might sound the same, but they do very different things in a sentence.
Now, let's move on to a grammar gremlin that trips up a lot of people. The double negative.
Ah, yes. The dreaded double negative. And of course, Jake walks right into it.
Of course he does. Emily asks him for a sentence with a double negative, and Jake, without missing a beat, says, I don't need no help.
Oh, Jake. He was so close.
So close. Alex explains that in English, when you use two negatives, they actually cancel each other out and make a positive. So when Jake says, I don't need no help, he's actually saying that he does need help.
It's one of those rules that can be especially tricky if your native language doesn't work the same way.
Totally. And to be sure, Jake asks, what about I didn't see nothing? Is that wrong too?
Which it is, of course. The right way to say it is, I didn't see anything.
This shows how important it is to really get the nuances of English grammar, Even a small word change can completely flip the meaning of a sentence.
It's like a balancing act. Every word has its part to play in getting the message across.
Okay, so for our final Grammar Wars challenge in this part, we're tackling another tricky pronoun pair, I versus me.
Oh, these two little words, they cause so much confusion. Hopefully we can clear things up a bit.
I hope so too. So Emily asks Jake to use one of these pronouns in a sentence. And Jake, ever confident, says, "Me and Alex went to the store."
Uh-oh, another classic pronoun trap.
Exactly. Alex jumps in to explain that when you have a compound subject, like Alex and I, you have to use I. So the correct sentence is, Alex and I went to the store.
It all comes down to like what the pronoun is doing in the sentence. Is it the one doing the action or is it receiving the action?
Exactly. And a helpful tip here is to take the other person out of the sentence. If it still sounds right, you've used the correct pronoun. So I went to the store works, but me went to the store doesn't. Such a good trick. It makes it so much easier to remember. But just when you think you've got it, English throws you a curveball. Jake asks, what about this is a gift for Alex and I?
Ah, yes, the gift-giving grammar dilemma. This is where me comes in. If you take out Alex, it should still sound right. So this is a gift for me is correct, while this is a gift for I sounds totally wrong.
So the main point is I is for subjects and me is for objects.
Exactly. A simple rule, but it can be tricky to use in real life.
And that's why it's so important to keep practicing and to pay attention to how native speakers use these little words.
Absolutely. Now, before we jump into our final part, what are some of the key things you think our listeners should remember from these grammar wars battles?
It's amazing how much we can learn from just a few examples, right? It really shows how grammar can be tricky, even for native speakers.
Yeah, it's like you think you've got it all figured out and then English throws you a curveball. But that's what makes it so interesting. It's a constantly evolving language, and there's always something new to learn. Exactly. And I think that's what's so great about Grammar Wars. They make learning grammar fun and engaging, even when they're tackling some pretty complex concepts.
Totally. So are you ready for our final Grammar Wars showdown?
Hit me with it. What grammatical gauntlet will Emily throw down this time?
Well, it seems we've come full circle, back to those tricky pronouns, who versus whom. Remember how Jake so confidently declared, "Who do you love?"
Oh, yes, I remember that. He was so close, but not quite there.
Exactly. Alex, our grammar guru, gently reminded him that whom is the correct choice in that case, because it's the object of the verb love. And to make it easier to remember, he gave this great tip.
Oh, yeah, the he or him trick. So clever.
Right. If he sounds right, use who. And if him sounds right, use whom. It's like a little shortcut for your brain.
It's so simple, yet so effective.
Yeah.
It's like a magic decoder ring for pronouns. But even with that trick, this is one of those rules that even native speakers get wrong sometimes.
Oh, definitely. In fact, I've heard some linguists say that the distinction between who and whom is becoming less important in modern English.
Really? That's fascinating. Just goes to show that language is constantly changing and evolving.
It really does. And I think that's an important point for our English language learners to remember. Don't be afraid to experiment and make mistakes. That's how you learn and grow.
Absolutely. So to wrap things up, as we conclude our deep dive into the wild world of grammar wars, what are some key takeaways our listeners should remember?
Well, I think the biggest one is that grammar isn't just about memorizing rules. It's about understanding how language works and how to use it effectively to communicate.
Right, totally. It's about understanding the why behind the rules, not just the what.
Exactly. And another important point is that it's okay to make mistakes. Everyone does, even the most experienced writers and speakers. The key is to learn from those mistakes and keep practicing.
It's all about having that growth mindset. And you know what? I think Jake from Grammar Wars is a great example of that. He never shied away from a challenge. He always asked questions, and he was always eager to learn.
He really was. He embraced the learning process, even when it got a little messy.
Exactly. So, to all our listeners out there, remember that learning grammar is a journey, not a destination. Keep learning, keep practicing, and don't be afraid to make mistakes along the way. That's how you improve.
Absolutely. Embrace the messiness of language learning.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this grammatical adventure, everyone. Until next time, keep those sentences flowing.
And those grammar skills sharp.